stood up straight and began praising God. But the leader of the synagogue, indignant because Jesus had cured on the Sabbath, kept saying to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which work ought to be done. Come on those days and be cured, not on the Sabbath day." But the Lord answered him and said, "You hypocrites! Does not each of you on the Sabbath untie his ox or his donkey from the manger and lead it away to lead it to water? And ought not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan bound for 18 long years, be set free from this bondage on the Sabbath day?" When he said this, all his opponents were put to shame, and the entire crowd was rejoicing at all the wonderful things that he was doing. Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Christ.
In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen.
Amen.
Please be seated. If I were, by the way, great song selection, John. We didn't have it at the morning, but the Church One Foundation is Jesus Christ our Lord. She is the new creation. If you take nothing else from today, that's the message. That's what I'm going to be talking about. There are days, well, let me preface this by starting with this. Hello. Hello. It's good to be back. I hope Father John shook the foundations. I wish I had his calmness. I drank too much coffee and have too many kids, but he's a great guy. I hope he shook the foundations. There are days that I wish I was a Presbyterian. Not a Calvinist, but a Presbyterian. And this would be one of them. Because I want to talk about Isaiah for hours. In fact, I want to talk about Isaiah for months. Isaiah is one of those books that when you start to discover, you start to realize how little you know. All of us, except you, I know, if you're hearing this, all of us have a tendency to systematize God. Systematize him in a way that he responds to our, "No, God, you're supposed to operate like this. No, God, you're supposed to operate like this. No, that's outside of your, that's outside of the rules, God." But Isaiah blows it away. If I had 2 lifetimes to study, I still wouldn't understand. Isaiah emerges as a set of documents, probably by a number of authors, we really have no idea, but a set of documents at a time of political and religious crisis in Judah's life. That's the southern kingdom. Remember, Israel, the northern kingdom, and Judah, the southern kingdom. And the books of Isaiah emerge through this crisis. Isaiah probably represents a competing thought of theology more distant than the most radical distances that we have in Christianity. Take perhaps maybe Catholicism and charismatic Pentecostalism, and you have these, not even that because they were killing each other. But take those extremes and you have the book of Isaiah vis-a-vis or compared to the Deuteronomists who would enforce the rules of the book of Deuteronomy. We have these two schools that are competing for the life of what it meant to be a follower of Yahweh, right? Fascinating history, by the way. So in the period of crisis, we can probably break Isaiah down into 3 sections. I would love to spend time on this. I'm going to fly through it. The first section is the warning. Israel, Judah, I'm going to say Israel, but it's really Judah at this point in time. Remember Judah, if you haven't been here long enough, keep coming. Judah is the seat of David. It's the seat of Jerusalem. It's the heart of the kingdom, the heart of the promise at this point in time. Hence, when we get into Samaria and the Samaritans in the New Testament, they're the ones that ignored God. That's what the good Jews thought at that point in time. But so Judah, you're not obeying my ways. This is section 1 of Isaiah. Judah, you're not listening to me. Judah, you're not paying attention. At this point in time, the northern kingdoms, which always buffered Judah against the assaults of the powerful Assyrians and other kingdoms, the northern kingdoms began and crumbled to the Assyrians. And the Assyrians were marching on Jerusalem to do the same to them. Assyria was a pretty strong force. And the southern kingdom, or Judah's king, started to get really worried. And so what do you do when that happens? You start making political allies, right? And God is saying, I'm the only ally you need, Judah. Well, they however you want to approach it. They ignored him. So the second section of Isaiah is what we call the exile, the Exodus. When wasn't the Assyrians, because they were conquered, the Babylonians, the Assyrians failed in their conquest of Judah, but the Babylonians came down, took on Jerusalem, won, escorted the top, essentially the elites. That's what Babylon did. They would escort the elites out of town and give all the ripe vineyards and the ruling to the underclass. How do you think the underclass felt about that? All right, these Babylonians aren't so bad, man. We kind of like these guys. I get a vineyard, I get a nice house, I get a kingdom. And that's how Babylon ruled. So Judah became a vassal state to Babylon. And the elites got carried off. The elites didn't like this so much, and but they're the one who write history, so they called this the exile, right? They got exiled to Babylon. And then the third part, and we are in today's readings on the verge of the exile moving into what we call the post-exilic period. So exciting. I hope your hackles are raising because this stuff thrills me. Oh, I gotta make this more exciting for y'all. Okay, so the post-exilic period is the point where they come back and restructure Israel. So the Israel and the God and the temple worship that we know mostly comes from the restructured Israel of the post-exilic period. Does that make sense? So through that lots to be, plenty more to be said about this, but I'm not going to get into it all today. But so God keeps warning Israel. Oversimplification, yes, but for the purposes of today, accurate. God keeps saying to Israel, Judah, Israel. Israel, you're not listening to me. Pay attention. You're not trusting in me. I am your ally. I am your Savior. I am your God. Stop making friends with these other people who will abandon you. Pay attention to me. Judah, for a while, agrees, watches the collapse of the northern kingdom, starts making allies. Eventually, God says, Israel, I'm leaving you. It's been great. It's been a good couple thousand years. I'm done. I'm leaving you. Great. I mean, it's in the text. He says, I'm going away. But I'm coming back. And not only when I come back, and this is where we move on chapter 56 on, when I come back, it's going to be awesome. And this is where our Jewish brothers and sisters and I we would kind of disagree on the history and development of that kind of post-exilic process. But essentially his promise is I'm coming back and I'm making things even better than they were before. And you can imagine the post-exilic people coming back to their Jerusalem thinking, boy, he's going to rebuild Israel. He's going to give us a new king, right? So that's the anticipation. We've been away for thousands of years, not thousands of years, we've been away for a generation. We hunger for rebuilt Jerusalem. Oh man, that's the rebuilding we really want. So you're getting the tenor of what the people were expecting when Jesus came to come and talk to them. Right? But he says, I'm going away and I'm going to be back. And then, so when we open, I was struggling with this week, this great promise comes out in Isaiah 54. Now, this isn't parenthetical, this is essential. Isaiah 53 is one of about the 4 hymns. If you've ever read Tolstoy jumps into just complete randomness right in the middle, like he just changes genres suddenly in the middle of his text. Am I right, Meredith? Is that true?
No.
Oh, okay, well, it's that. Books are too big for me, I can't read Tolstoy, but pretend Tolstoy jumps into complete different genres in the middle of the book. That's what happens in the middle of Isaiah. And scholars, I mean, we've never agreed about what Isaiah is all about. It could be a collection of documents. But you go from this history and this warning, and suddenly you get these prominent and beautiful images of a suffering servant. You get them 4 times through Isaiah. And the most prominent beginning just before Isaiah 53. I'm not touching on that today, but if anything convinces me of the inspiration of Scripture is that. Isaiah 53. But jumping into Isaiah 54, God tells his people this. He says, look, y'all. He says that. This is y'all in the text. Aaron Revised Version 2016. It says, look, y'all. I am done being angry with you. I've been angry with you. In fact, I took these greedy people and I thought, you know what I'm going to do with these greedy people? I'm going to spank them. I'm going to punish them. And he said, but here's the problem. They just went on being greedy. They just went on doing their own thing, so I'm going to do a new thing. thing, Israel. He says this. It's amazing. It's beautiful. He says, I'm going to love you. And I'm going to give up anger for goodness. Whoa. He says in Isaiah 54, he says, I am making a covenant with you today as I made with Noah. What was the covenant with Noah? I'm not going to kill you, all right? I'm not going to destroy you by flood. Here's my rainbow as a promise. He says, I'm making a new covenant with you today, Israel. A new promise that I am not going to be angry with you anymore. So this is where we start to understand this transition to a kind of new covenant, amazing language. I'm not going to be angry with you anymore. And what's more, he says, if you don't believe me, look it up, Isaiah 54. He says, this isn't just for you. This promise isn't just for you, but it's for all nations. And this is a promise for all peoples who seek after my heart. And he says, and not only that, any man or woman who comes up before me, does good, honors the poor, etc., 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 and keeps the Sabbath will be my child, and I will be their God. And I read through that this week. I didn't know this was the text coming up, and I thought, oh no! I shop at Walmart after Sunday. Am I keeping the Sabbath? But of course, what's the Sabbath, by the way?
Saturday.
Right? Where does the Sabbath come from? Where does the notion of Sabbath come from? You got it first time. Good job. We messed up at the last service. They said from the law. The law is reflective of the desirous good of God in creation itself, right? God spent 6 days working his butt off. And what did he do on the seventh day?
Rest.
Except, and I'm stealing a little bit from N.T. Wright here, so if you ever want to read this in actually better detail, N.T. Wright wrote a book called Scripture and the Authority of God. He spends an entire chapter talking about the Sabbath. I will do it in justice, talking about it right now. But that seventh day isn't not doing anything. That's not what that means. Don, if you're building a garden in your backyard, you're spending all this effort building this beautiful garden with a patio, there's a fire pit, and there are beautiful flowers, and there are chairs in that backyard. Imagining it right now, you spend 6 days building that patio. What are you going to do on the seventh day? Not touch anything? What are you going to do on the seventh day once it's all done? What's that? Tend. That's a great word. I'm going to sit in that patio chair with a cigar and a quart, and I'm going to enjoy it. I'm going to sit in it. I'm going to tend it, but not the work part of it. I'm going to actually enjoy the fruits of my labor. Meaning Sabbath is not just not doing anything. Sabbath is reflective of the idea of what God intended creation to be. He didn't do nothing on the seventh day. He sat in it. He owned it. He ruled it. And so 6 days of work, 1 day of reflecting of creation the way that it ought to be, living in the garden. Right? And so we have another notion that emerges out of the Old Testament that's also reflective of this seventh day sacred time. And that's how you really ought to think about it. The world is profane and fallen for 6 days, but 7 days, remember that God intended from that day. Another notion starts emerging in the Old Testament from this, and that's the notion of the Jubilee. Anybody know what the Jubilee is? What's that? Harry?
Mullet.
You gotta speak in English. I can't hear you. What's that? Mullet. Jubilee, right? Oh, mullet coming. Oh. Why did you give me these people, Lord? The Sabbath, the Jubilee is a day of forgiveness. Right? It's the day of letting go. So pretend Marley, I am Marley's slave. Well, better yet, pretend I'm Meredith's slave. Meredith owns me. Just pretend. I am Meredith's slave. Meredith owns me. And remember, this wasn't kind of the chattel. This was a different type of slavery. If you were poor and needed food, you could sell yourself to someone. And God said, yeah, you could work for 6 years. I can't remember the fullness of this. But on the 7th year, if I owed Meredith a lot of money, she would have to say, Okay, that's enough. Because even the most indebted people need a break. Everybody needs a break. And God would say, you have to pay back your debts for 6 years. But on the 7th year, you got to give a break. Which is why God hates people who piles it on the 6th year through the Old Testament and who demand repayment on the 6th year. He hates this injustice, right? But there's an even bigger jubilee than the 7th year, and that's the 7th year, this times the 7th year, which is the 49th or 50th year. And that's where everything is released. Everything is reset. All the crap that we do to each other is restored to the order of Sabbath, or that idea which God intended. God never intended me to be indebted to Meredith, or Kathy to be indebted to Larry, or however you want to look at this. And so this indentured nature, he said, free on the 49th year, or the 50th years of the Jubilees. And so now we're flying back. Do you follow me with this? So Sabbath is not a notion of not working. It's a notion of living in God's reality in the way that God's reality ought to be lived in, which includes rest. Take a break. Stop working for selfish means, right? So when Isaiah jumps into today's text, he's promising something, and he's promising, I'm going to make you all my people. I'm going to include this promise for all nations, but as long as you keep my Sabbath. And I started to worry about that. Are we not keeping Sabbaths? Except that we have to jump forward to today's gospel to figure out what the Sabbath is now. What did Jesus do in today's gospel on the Sabbath? He healed, right? He restored life. He fixed something that was broken. I hope you're getting excited about this as I am. Maybe I have to pump it up a little bit, but this is amazing stuff. It's really exciting. He healed on the Sabbath day. Now, traditionally, when we were a little less schooled on first century Palestine, we understood this as the simple dynamic of the Pharisees being too hardcore and Jesus being this radical liberal. It's not right. It's not the way that it was. In fact, every time Jesus reiterated a command, he made it harder. So don't just not commit adultery, don't look with lust, right? Don't just not kill someone, David, that should be pretty easy to do. Don't even hurt them. Don't just not cheat someone, Bill. Don't even lie. Let your yes be your yes and your no be no. Making sense? Jesus didn't liberalize the law. He made it harder. But why then, when we're talking about the Sabbath, why was he healing on the Sabbath since he wasn't playing this fast and loose with the rule game? Because he was telling them something, and something they really didn't like. Remember, rewinding, I better not have lost you yet, because this is but remember rewinding a little bit, Jesus inaugurates his ministry. He goes into a synagogue, and he stands at the front, and he reads in the passage. And that passage is Isaiah 61. And Isaiah 61 says, Lo and behold, a day will come when I will free the captive. I will give food to the hungry. I will heal the sick. Lo and behold, I am bringing my promise to fulfillment. This is God in Isaiah. And what does Jesus say? He says, today, this has been accomplished in your midst. I've come. Today, this has been accomplished. And all the people in the synagogue go, oh, that's so amazing. Oh, Jesus, that's so cool. We really like that idea. And I'm doing it for all people. Stone them. Right? No, this is just supposed to be for us. You're supposed to build a kingdom for us, the Jews. Not for all nations and all people. You're just supposed to build a Jewish kingdom in Israel. What are you talking about? Stone him. Literally what happens. Look it up in, I think it's Luke chapter 4 or 6. It happens a little bit earlier. But Jesus is saying when he's healing on the Sabbath, he's not disrupting the Sabbath, he's being the Sabbath. When Jesus goes around and preaches ministry saying, Don, don't just not cheat on Greta, forgive me for picking you two up, but I love you, which is why I'm doing it. Don't even look lustfully at someone else. He's saying, live into the Sabbath. What's the Sabbath? I'm the Sabbath. I am the one who's recreating all things, restoring all things, renewing all things. Die to your old way of being, he's saying, and come into me. Because as he says in Isaiah chapter 54, I'm done being angry with you, done work. I'm doing it now. And when Jesus comes and starts fulfilling the obligation, starts restoring life, he's doing it on Sabbath for a reason. He's saying it's not about the stupid day, guys. It's about me. Remember, I am Lord of the Sabbath. Remember that little saying he says to people? The Sabbath belongs to me. I am restoring. And when you and I in this congregation, there's a reason why Jesus and the early Christians didn't really fuss too much about the Sabbath, although we should all take a day of rest. Because what's the Sabbath? We are. When we die to ourselves and allow ourselves to be resurrected in the life of Christ, we are the Sabbath. You don't just live Sabbath on a day anymore. It's not a Sunday or a Saturday thing. It's an every day of the week thing. Because the promise that Jesus offers in his death and resurrection is that I'm going to break down the barriers that just let you do this one day a week. It's now a full-time job. So what does that make us in the world? But full-time Sabbatarians. There's a reason the Christians, when they first started worship, and we believe that celebrating the Eucharist is an essential part of this reality, they called it the 8th day. This is the new day of creation. It's the new day. We used to live in the old dead world, but now we're living in the new day of renewal. When Christ is renewing all things in and through us. So when he makes things harder, he's actually saying, I will accomplish this through you. I am the Sabbath. You are the Sabbath. Live Sabbath at all points in time in your life. It's not just a one-day thing. It's an always thing. Die to our selfish greed. Die to our own desires. Die to putting ourselves first. Die to the lusts. Die to, you start to understand Paul more now. Die to all these things which disrupt the Sabbath and be the Sabbath in and through Christ. Live it, spread it, share it, operate by it. That's what new life in Christ looks like. And suddenly, when you go home today, I ask you to look at Isaiah chapter 53. You're going to be blown away by why God's promise comes so beautifully full in Christ. Are we ready to be the Sabbath? That's the only way I know what I did. Are we ready to be the Sabbath?
Yeah.
Amen. Yeah, yes, sir. Would you stand with me, please? Turn to page 358. Now, being the Sabbath realizes that we need to give people a break. So maybe taking a day off would not be such a bad thing, by the way. Page 358.